It was 9:15 in the night when we were arrested.
I was sent to jail without even being asked a single question.
उसको अंदाज़ा भी नहीं था कि एक फैमिली इशू इतना बड़ा क्राइम बन जाएगा।
गौओं के नाम पे अत्याचार बंद करो।
These provisions of IPC not only being misused, but they are grossly misused.
This is a tool which is being used only to extort money to make a better deal from the marriage.
If the wife demands something from the husband's family, like give me the car, give me the house, why that is not called dowry?
498 के केस डाल के ना बेचारे को बर्बाद कर दिया। 498 केस पढ़ने से बेचारा टूट गया।
If this law is going to be like this, definitely tomorrow we can see many more Manoj going to die in this society.
If after many years we notice that the law is being grossly abused, whether it is 498A or whether it is even 376 or whatever, it is incumbent upon a responsive government to rise up to the challenge and to address the problem.
Martyrs of Marriage essentially was a need for me. Honestly, it was in 2011 that my family went through a personal ordeal where, like the trailer says, like somebody in the trailer says, that, any dispute that happens in a marriage can actually be turned around into a dowry issue and a domestic violence issue. So that exactly is what happened in my family as well, where something that did not have an iota of dowry demand, iota of domestic violence, because the marriage was breaking down for some other reason, was made into a dowry issue and a domestic violence issue. And what really hurt me was that these kind of blatant lies can be told in front of the court. Most of us, as regular people, middle class people, do not really have to face courts or police in our day-to-day lives. And when something in your life happens where you have to actually deal with these things, you actually have a set of shock, you have fear, especially if you are an accused and you just don't know what's the way out. And when that happened with us, honestly, without any mistake, it was a trigger for me to actually do something about it. Because most of us, when we have personal experience with things, we understand things in a much better way than otherwise if we are just told about it. So that's how Martyrs of Marriage started. My idea was to actually tell people that they are not alone when they are falsely accused of a dowry or a domestic violence case. And there are thousands and thousands of people today, men, women, even children, who are implicated in these cases. And the most painful experience is when it happens to you, you think that you're the only person that this is happening to, and you really don't know what to do about it. So when it happened to us, I thought, let me tell people that they are not alone in this battle. This is happening a lot to people in various spheres of life, and they're dealing with something like this, and you're not alone. You can seek help, you can seek recourse, you can seek guidance, you can seek advice. So Martyrs of Marriage is a documentary on misuse of Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code. Section 498A basically criminalizes physical and mental cruelty on only a married woman by her husband and his relatives. And when I say relatives, it can actually be anybody. There have been cases where even neighbors have been implicated in these cases because they try to sort of, negotiate, they try to sort of intervene, they tried to sort of advise both the couple that, you know, do not fight, and, you know, maybe you can salvage your marriage. But then when the wife actually filed a 498A case on the husband, she implicated the neighbors as well. So this was a law that was brought in 1983. And like I say, it was a law that was brought to save lives. At that time, a lot of dowry deaths were happening in the country. Married women were being tortured and being really put through a harrowing time. And that's why the legislature, the lawmakers thought that it was the right time to actually bring a provision that would safeguard the rights of a married woman. But unfortunately, within few years of passing of the law, the provision was being misused for any kind of a dispute that would happen in a marriage. It was 1990 where first, you know, sort of started, or where reporting of actually misuse of the law started. And to my surprise, when something happened with me in 2011, which is, you know, 25, 26 years down the line of the law being passed, there was no, you know, mainstream film, there was no mainstream documentary, there was no mainstream reportage of this issue, when there were so many people who were suffering. And that's the time when I decided that I'm going to make a documentary to tell people that, you know, this is something that can happen to you. This is something that can happen to you when you're not at mistake at all. And this is something which is happening to a lot, many people. When marriages break down, there's a tool that is available to the woman where she can actually go ahead and accuse you of dowry, demand, and domestic violence when you may not have actually done anything. And then you'll be tried, and then you'll be tried for years. You may prove your innocence, but nothing really comes out of it. Like I said, 498A criminalizes marital cruelty, physical, emotional, sexual, any kind of violence within marriage. And it's a fact that this kind of behavior can be done by either a man or a woman. But the criminalization of that behavior happens only when a husband basically is cruel to the wife, not when the wife is cruel to the husband. So it's a very one-sided provision. Maybe the lawmakers thought that it was, when the law was brought, maybe the lawmakers thought that it was the right thing to do. But in today's time, we see every single day that marital violence happens on both ends. Husband can also be absolutely cruel to the wife and be violent to the wife, but there are enough and more instances where wife or the female partner can actually be very abusive to the husband as well. But the provision stays as it is. Not just the provision to grant actually rights to the woman, but the misuse actually is where the problem arises. In 2005, Supreme Court of India said that misuse of 498A was akin to legal terrorism. And when you bring in the word terrorism, it's kind of spreading terror, you know, and when you say legal terrorism, it's spreading terror through the law. Despite the recognition that it was akin to legal terrorism, the provision stays as it is. You know, while I was seeing the trailer, I was just thinking in my mind that it's been a long time that the documentary came, and you know, Manoj, there's a person whose name is Manoj who committed suicide because his wife filed or threatened him to file a false 498A on him and his entire family. And his brother actually says in the trailer that if the provision is not amended, then there will be many more people like Manoj who would commit suicide. And the fact is that till date, there are just so many men who are actually committing suicide because of being implicated in false dowry cases. And the lawmakers basically do not pay any heed to it, because I don't know if lives of men do not matter, or uh, you know they are just too scared to actually take a stand. But it's actually time that something is done about this. Something is done about this issue and this problem. Uh, as a journalist, as a documentary filmmaker, I am doing my job to tell people that this exists and this needs to change. But it's certainly upon the lawmakers to actually, rise up and do something about it. It's not just about matters of marriage. For the last 8 years, I've been working on men's rights. I've been working on men's issues. Like I shared in the beginning, the idea was just to make a documentary when I entered this space, but then I've been here for the last 8 years. There are a lot of issues that concern men today in the country. People don't think that men's issues are a legit concern to be discussed, but then I personally believe and feel that it's extremely important to actually talk about this, because we're all humans, and suffering of anybody should be eliminated and should be addressed. But when it comes to addressing issues that concern men, we have very, very few people talking about it, very few people trying to address this problem, because this is seen, I don't know why, as something which is anti-women when it is not, because all that we are saying is just the way we protect our women, let us protect our men as well. When it comes to the issue of liberty, dignity, self-respect, I think every human being deserves it. And anybody who faces a violation of that needs to talk about it, and that needs to be addressed as well. Now, let me just, I'm not going to delve too much into it, because I'm going to go to the questions, but there are a lot of things that deeply concern men today. One is absence of laws. When we talk about any gender-based crimes in India, whether it's marital cruelty, whether it's sexual harassment, whether it is stalking, whether it is rape, whether it is domestic violence, all of these provisions have existence in the law only for women. If a man is experiencing any of this kind of abuse, the provisions that are available in the law do not sort of apply to him. They're not available to him. So the recourse is not available. One is absence of laws. The second thing is misuse of the provisions that have been made for women. I'm making a documentary right now, which is called India's Sons, which is on false rape cases. So, it's absolutely essential, and it's absolutely important that we have laws for women. But it's ridiculous when they get misused and lives are destroyed by that misuse, and then there is no deterrent against it. That's where that's another problem that a lot of men are facing today, that provisions that have been made for women are being misused against men and boys as well, and there is little recourse available to them. And third, if I may say, is absence of data. Because we do not have provisions for men, we do not have any data telling how deep the problem is. And when we do not have statistics, it is very difficult to convey to people how big the problem is, what's the quantification of that problem, and that's sort of a challenge. So these are three important things that are sort of the problem area right now, and that's where my work sort of pitches in, where I'm telling stories and I'm telling tales of men who are experiencing abuse like this, so that at least people know that these things are happening with men, and this is sort of an issue that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Deepika, for introducing us to this. I have a question to start with. On a larger scale, I see it as, the scales which are yet to achieve a balance. If we talk about women's yes, there was a need for women's lib at a time, but then it came to pass, like, I'm sorry to say, but when that Uber rape case happened, I was not in the favor. I like, if even if it is a man who's stone drunk at 2 o'clock at night and takes a public transport, he runs the risk to get mugged or get looted. So I don't know. I think that takes time for a society to achieve that kind of balance. The law was skewed in favor of men for a very long time. Now it is skewed in favor of women. When do you see this happening in India?
See, Aparna, I'll tell you something. I have said this time and over again. We still need a lot of work on women's rights. There are a lot of women who do not feel safe because these kind of things are happening on a daily basis with them. We definitely need rights for women, and we definitely need to talk about it. If I would sort of compare the kind of crimes that happen against men as compared to the crimes that happen against women, there is of course no comparison. Women go through much harder things, and then the kind of gory crimes that happen to women are unimaginable and very sad and we come across them every single day. But then the idea is that when we are talking about protection, I think we need to talk about protection of everybody, because these kind of incidents happen with men as well. There are men who are sexually abused as well. There are men who are victims of domestic violence as well. And to say that we would sort of grant or justice only to women against this kind of behavior is, I think, a little skewed. That's sort of a societal thing, and that sort of, you cannot control crime. No matter how developed any country is, crime is everywhere. But what the lawmakers can actually do is to give a sense of security to its citizens. Through my work, what I see every single day is that there are a lot of men who feel that they're not secure, and the lawmakers have certainly failed to grant security to them, because if they are attacked, if they are abused in a way that the lawmakers do not understand, that they can be harassed or attacked by a woman, then they feel that there is just no way for them, which is, I think, is sort of a sad thing to feel. And I think that sentiment is growing because with women liberation, with women empowerment, there are just so many men who are going through bad experiences today, but they just keep it in their heart because they know, one, they cannot report because there are no provisions for them, and two is nobody would believe them. And when you actually think that nobody is going to believe you about the bad experience that you have, I think that's a very sulking feeling. And many men who are feeling this sulking feeling today because they do not have protection of the laws, which I think is a sad thing. Yeah.
I have a few questions. Ma'am, this IPC 498A, is this a law applicable only to Hindus or to all religions?
Okay, so Indian Penal Code 498A is a section under the Indian Penal Code. The Indian Penal Code is applicable to everybody, irrespective of religion, caste, creed, or anything. So a woman who's a wife from any caste, creed, religion can actually file this case on her husband and his entire family as well. So yeah, it's not religion specific, it's not caste specific.
The feminism, I feel that today it has gone to such an extent that many men have also internalized misandry. Like today's third wave feminism is quite reduced to man-hating. Men sometimes view with suspicion, and what about those men who have also internalized the misandry and who are not ready to believe that men also face this? Like, how do you deal with that? And that's all.
About feminists, sort of the third wave of feminism actually going anti-men, I would certainly agree with you. from the idea of actually empowering women and actually fighting for fighting for women. There are a lot of people who actually feel it, and I will again go back to people shape their opinions on the basis of their experiences. And there are just too many people who experience this hatred in today's time. A lot of people, especially women, actually have issues with me, concerns with me that I do not call myself a feminist, and I criticize feminism a lot of times. But there is a background to it. There is an experience to it. If you're going to say all men are trash, if you're going to put down men all the time, if your conversation is hateful, then of course people are going to question it. Of course people are going to have a problem with it. Nobody has a problem with people fighting for women. Nobody. I don't know of anyone ever, even in the men's rights space. I deal with men all the time. I deal with men and women, women who are relatives of these men all the time. Nobody has ever said that women should not get rights, or women should not get their due, or women should not get justice. Nobody ever says that. But all that people are saying is that women getting justice do not mean that you treat men as collateral damages. Getting women their rights and getting women their dues does not mean that you deny the rights to a man. But sadly, feminists do not sort of understand this. And again, there's no generalization, but then it's the experiences, it's the lived experiences of a lot of people who see that there's a lot of hate that is coming from the feminist movement, where they denounce a gender completely because some people do wrong. On a daily basis, I come across cases of murder of men by women. I come across cases of false accusations on men by women. Nobody goes around and then starts hating all the women because some women do wrong. But then what is really palpable and what is really happening every single day, and it's just not my spectrum, it's not just my sphere, Shreya. I'm talking to you for the very first day. And if you observe this on Twitter, you of course have a very different space in which you operate your social media accounts. You would have absolutely different people to follow. But then if you are having an experience like that, it says something. There are more and more people who are actually experiencing this, that from the idea of empowerment of women today, it's become about hate for men, which is not a good thing. So yeah, it's happening.
So Deepika ji, thank you for your brief lecture and opening up this Q&A for a long period of time. I love Q&As. So my first question is, so 498A was brought in with a certain objective in mind. What I would like to find out, if you have data, information, or whatever, about how successful it has been in meeting its objectives. Like after its promulgation, has those cases reduced, or people are a little scared of that, or whatever?
Okay. So there's 498A, and then there's this law called 304B, which is dowry deaths. As I shared in the beginning, the law was brought in when in 1980s there were a lot of these incidents that would happen where the wife dies. And most of the times these cases would be that the gas चूल्हे से आग लग गई और या वो जल गई किसी वजह से घर में. And there were a lot of these instances that were happening at that time, and these would basically go as sort of incidents of fire or things like that. And if there was not enough evidence or something, it would go as just a casualty, which was a natural occurrence. But then there were a lot of activists, women activists, who found that, the woman was actually being harassed for dowry, and that's why the in-laws actually orchestrated all of this and then, burnt the woman. And one of the very prominent crusaders at that time was Madhu Kishwar, and she actually fought for a lot of women at that time. And then in 1983, 498A came, which after the lawmakers realized that these were not natural deaths, these were not cases of natural fire or something, but these were cases where the woman was actually burnt by in-laws. To come back to your question of what has changed, the numbers have only increased for years and years and years and years. And the number of dowry deaths also, 304B also, have only kept increasing. But not to say that the crimes, these are actually deaths which happened due to dowry, but I think the provisions actually lent themselves a very easy mechanism where now I don't usually touch upon this topic, but then let me just share some of my experiences. There are cases where the woman would actually commit suicide because she was under depression, because of many reasons. And then, for example, there was a case that came to me recently where this woman who was a doctor was not able to give birth to a child. She had one child who was sort of born dead, and after that she had a miscarriage, and she was under tremendous depression because of that. And eventually she gave up on life. No suicide note, nothing at all. No, sorry. In fact, there was a suicide note where she said that, she's fed up of her life and that's why she's taking her life and she's ending her life. But her husband is now under the charges of dowry death, and he is behind bars. And the entire family was implicated. Then they had a harrowing time. So it's any kind of a suicide of a married woman within 7 years of marriage also gets to be reported a lot of times as dowry death. 498A particularly, I think the lawmakers just do not care. But as far as conviction rate in 498A is concerned, it's abysmally low. And any conviction that happen in 498A cases also happen when it is filed along with 304B, which is dowry death cases, which is suicide cases, and the husband would be convicted saying, the woman has committed suicide, there must have been some kind of a harassment or a torture, and the man gets convicted. Otherwise, 498A conviction rate is extremely low. And there have been a lot of researches done where 498A actually, as compared to any other provision under the IPC, has the lowest conviction rate. So I don't know if actually the intention for which the law was brought has been achieved or not. And I would once again repeat, Madam Madhu Kishwar says this a lot of times, even though she was one of the front runners for fighting for women's rights in 1980s, and she actually wrote extensively about it. She always says this, and I hope she's heard someday by the lawmakers. She says that these laws definitely need a review, because they were brought with a certain intent. And the intent, whether that intent has been achieved or not, whether the laws that were made with good intent have been are being used for absolutely different purpose. This certainly needs to be reviewed, because there is gross abuse, and if the genuine victims are not actually getting help of these laws, then what are these laws actually serving purpose of? So yeah, um, they definitely need a review. And to answer you, the instances or the incidents have only gone up and not slowed down or reduced at all.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the talk. I work as a counseling psychologist, so I'm coming more from that perspective. I have come across men who've undergone such abuse at work, but so far I've got to speak to 2 men who've undergone such abuse outside of work. And one person actually had a 498A filed against him, and one was threatened that would happen, although it did not happen, thankfully. Now, hearing from both these men, when I'm hearing about their wives, it seemed to me that there was, again, only from what I heard from the man, it seemed that the woman had a certain personality disorder. And it's not for me to diagnose. I more work as a counseling, not a clinical psychologist, but it was really similar. So I wanted to ask you if you've come across this kind of an angle as to why the woman would do this, and any kind of psychological profile.
Yep. Okay, Sanjana, right? Yeah, Sanjana. Since you've brought this up, let me share something that happened. So when I was making Martyrs of Marriage, I had funds challenges. I did not have money to make the film, and there was a time when I just completely had no idea how will I eventually make this happen. And then I got to know about somebody who was a entrepreneur and ran a company, with business of millions and millions. And I got to know that he was slapped with a 498A after 22 years of marriage. Okay. After 22 years of marriage, they had 2 kids. And so I approached this person and I said, I'm making a documentary like this, and I know that you have been accused of it. I would want to know your story as well, and just ask you, can you financially support this project? You know what this man said? He said, I will definitely fund your project, but don't make it on 498A, because the problem is not with 498A. The problem is borderline personality disorder, BPD. Can you make a documentary on that? Because there are a lot of women who suffer BPD, and these are the women who do this. And there is definitely a disorder. I know my wife has a BPD, and he had these many books. He had researched so much on borderline personality disorder, and he said, you should shift your focus from 498 to BPD, because most of these women who are filing false accusations or filing false cases, they are suffering with borderline personality disorder. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I cannot go around judging people on their personality traits or, human behavior. And I can't call these women, suffering from some kind of a disorder. And that's not my objective at all. I'm going to talk about a law because that's what is in the framework of provisions by the lawmakers, and they need to take an account of it. But to come back to what you're saying, yes, in a lot of cases, Sanjana, I honestly feel that there is some problem. There's some problem that this person is suffering from, because of which they end up doing this, because it's not human to see somebody suffer so bad, when in a lot of cases, it's actually the person who's at mistake, There are cases where women would have extramarital affairs, and, they would they would be absolutely fine in emotionally abusing the husband and gaslighting that person and making that person feel completely inferior. And then if the person objects to that affair, she would go to her parents' place and then file this kind of cases on the man and then ask for huge sums as well. You got to be really, really, really a different kind of human being to be doing that. And yes, there are cases that I have come across where certainly there is some kind of a personality disorder with the woman. But again, the problem is that the man cannot do anything about it because she wouldn't see a psychologist, she wouldn't see a psychiatrist, she would think that she's not at mistake and it's the man at mistake, and she would actually go to any extent to actually punish him as well. So, but then again, it's a diagnosis, it's a psychological diagnosis that no ordinary person can do. So I would refrain from saying how many people actually suffer from that, but yes, it definitely happens. And the sad thing is that there is no understanding of this concept in our courts. In West, I have had my friends tell me that in cases of domestic violence, they actually have a medical, a doctor. It's not just the police that gets involved in these cases. There are doctors that get involved in these cases. There are psychologists who get involved in these cases, and they analyze the case in a full spectrum. But in India, there's no understanding like that. There's just no understanding like that. And I think it's very crucial actually to actually have psychologists involved in these matters. But then lives don't matter in India only. So yeah. But yeah, I agree.
Just to add my 2 bits, the borderline personality disorder, the borderline is where is the border of the borderline? Where do you from a book written from one perspective? I mean, if I write a book, I would feel that 98% of humanity has BPD because everybody has idiosyncrasies. So in these cases, you'll have parents who had BPD, or you will have peers of the husband who had BPD, or the wife, that may,
Absolutely, absolutely. Anybody could be suffering from these issues, and these are not issues which are which kind of is which you can hold against somebody or something like that. These are personality traits, and anybody can be counseled, and a lot of these disorders can actually be understood and addressed, and the person be coached. But the idea is that when these disputes happen, nobody looks at this perspective, which I think Sanjana makes a point, and the right point, which should actually be looked at, because if the situation hasn't gone out of control, I think it can be controlled by counseling, by coaching, and by actually telling people that, okay, this is wrong or this is right, and things like that. But yes, there's no acknowledgement. So anybody could be suffering from it, man, woman, or anybody. But it's where I was coming from, or I think where Sanjana comes from, is that, is it normal for a human being to actually put somebody else to so much of suffering and distress and then be okay with it, So I think that's the point, yeah.
As an activist, I would like to know, you are an activist, so from that perspective, are you taking this men's right into the legal space for finding some right antidote against this 98A sections and all? And second question is, you also had said that when the judgments are passed, they are more like biased, unfortunately, biased towards women, and they are more viewed from the social angle. So while handling such cases, do they also take this lie detector test where, when there are situations where a man cannot provide enough of evidence due to unfortunate situations. So these are my questions, ma'am. Thank you.
But I come from the domain of journalism. I don't come from the domain of law, and that's sort of a challenge for me, which sort of limits me in intervening in judicial sort of way. But like I said, that's in the pipeline, and that's where the future lies for me personally as well. And to and honestly, that's where the men's rights movement actually needs to focus, because we can make as much hue and cry about men's issues. We can talk as much as we want about men's issues, but the real change lies in the courts. The real change lies in the parliament. Thankfully, there are some parliament members who have actually taken note of this and who have actually spoken about this as well in the parliament, but definitely a long way to go, majorly because talking about men, sort of people view it as anti-woman for whatever they feel like, when it is not. And it is very risky for anybody who's in the position of power to seemingly see like anti-woman, and that's why very few people actually want to do this. But I'm sure things will change, and people will realize that there are a lot of people who want them to actually speak about these issues and take a stand, and I'm sure there will be a change when there are so many false accusations. And when you actually start treating words of somebody, and this is the case in cases of crime against women and women cases, when you start treating the words of somebody as evidence in itself, then I think these tests have extreme significance, because they can sort of give you some direction as to whether the person is telling the truth. And of course, then there is cross-examination and various ways in which cases get tried. But I think this can actually serve a good purpose for sifting the truth from the lie. But again, judicially, they do not have too much of significance. They can just add on, they can just be an aid, but they cannot be the final end.
Thank you again for being a very forthright voice in this movement. I had a very dear friend of mine who was associated with the Martyrs of Marriage video regarding a DNA test, as some of us may know. And having been a victim of the process myself, I have been through the court systems, and I would like to make a few comments followed by a question. The one thing that people have raised is about borderline personality disorder. So a lot of the individuals, right, who partake in such, false cases, if I can put it that way, do suffer from that. And the parents tend to come to the defense to justify why the marriage has failed, right? So it's kind of more of a blame game and justification over, okay, hamari galti nahi thi, ladka aisa tha, kind of. So that's one thing, and the law allows them to get away. The second point is about forensic evidence. Being a scientist myself, I can say that, a lot of, and in this common friend of ours case, even the DNA evidence, which was conclusive in terms of parental rights, was not accepted in part by the High Court, right? So our court systems are lacking behind. I think they're probably in the dark ages when it comes to recognition of what is scientific evidence. For example, me being in the US, I can say that in typical domestic violence cases or things of that sort, as you had rightly suggested, ma'am, there is counseling. They do all kinds of due diligence and they counsel both parties equally, right, to find out perspectives. And it's a judicious assessment of who is at play. But our system, A, neither has the know-how, B, does not have the sensitivity, and C, does not care. So I'm not sure how much. I know that judicial reforms are needed, but I think we still have a long way to go. But my point was related to in terms of prevention, right? Because obviously anyone in the healthcare field would know prevention is better than cure. Is there a way that we could disseminate this information so people, can be a little cautious when they go ahead, that, theek hai, shadi karna, it's okay, but then you have to be aware of these pitfalls. because it can take years of your life. Like in my case, it was a short marriage and I lost a decade of my life for nothing, right? And if I tell you what the forensic evidence was, it was laughable. It was, a cut on a finger made with a knife and a band-aid prescribed. Uh, long story short, I just wanted to ask that if there's anything that we could do on our part, right, to disseminate the information and make others aware so they can be a little more cautious while, getting into a matrimonial alliance, and at least, doing the due diligence that they need to do to avoid whatever they can.
Very good question, Mohit. Honestly, a lot of people ask me this, what can be prevention? There are a lot of young men who are scared to get married today because they know what's happening around. Honestly, there is barely anything that a man can do to not land up into these cases. But I had shared few days ago a tweet which actually was shared widely, where I think it's very, very important to ask very, very important questions from your would-be partner. And I think it's not just for men, it's for women as well. And I think it's upon the lawmakers to probably disseminate information, because there's so much only that activists can do. It's very important for people to actually ask what the kind of lifestyle people live, the kind of basic nature or basic behavioral patterns that people have. Unfortunately, till date in India, people get married thinking it's a very, we have built a halo around this, around marriage, and people not realizing that it can fall apart. Even though there are so many divorces happening, still when people get married, they have this, halo of trust and belief and thinking that, things will not go wrong and it's a lifelong bond and things like that. But the fact is, the reality is not that today. So the only prevention is to actually invest some time in knowing the person that you're going to get married to. And people do so much of research and buying small little things these days, but people barely do exhaustive research when they're marrying somebody. This is the only prevention, I think. So there is no other prevention, because the law is as such that if a woman goes to the police station, the police is bound to register her FIR, and the FIR would be filed on you if the woman presses so, and then you will have to defend yourself. So there is no prevention. There is nothing that a man can do in terms of stopping a woman from filing an FIR against him. Of course, there are cases in which final reports are filed, in which the case is proven as false, and the man gets away and sort of saves himself from all of this. But it needs extreme amount of evidence. Like, some things that definitely a man's side can do is to document whatever the give and take is during the marriage, so that exorbitant claims cannot be made in terms of expenditure on the marriage. That's the only thing that they can do. There's no other thing.
I was just wondering, do you think a prenup agreement or something like that would help?
Sanjana, we do not have prenup agreements are not legal in India. I think the only territory in which they are accepted is Goa. I've heard this. Again, I do not have any experience. I haven't met anybody who has had prenup agreement in Goa and that was accepted in case of divorce. I have just heard this, so I do not. Otherwise, nowhere else prenup agreements are accepted in India. The Women and Child Development, the WCD ministry has been delving into the space where they are definitely looking at prenup agreements. But if the WCD ministry is going to, undertake this assignment, then I'm pretty sure that they're going to come out with very biased and one-sided acceptance of a prenup agreement. So yeah, there are no prenup agreements in India. And even if you have a prenup agreement, nothing stops a woman from filing a criminal case. So even if you have had a prenup agreement, she can say that I was tortured. So yeah, doesn't stop her from filing criminal cases. I think they can just help in terms of maybe financial settlement. That's it.
We have run out of time, but Deepika, I have one last question.
Yes.
As a married woman, when I was going through, it was not an anti-dowry thing. It was not a dowry abuse. It was abuse, sheer abuse, physical, mental, emotional, at the hands of a person who was a drug addict. He was diseased, basically. Nice person, but diseased. As a married woman in India, under the Hindu Marriage Act, you virtually have no options. If you go to the court for a divorce, they will try their best to bring you. So like what is admissible in the court is that you're being tortured or beaten up, or, we've sold ourselves so short. The benchmark is so bloody low. It's so low that unless he's like beating you, it's okay. They really don't consider that. So I was told by my lawyers that you slap an anti-dowry thing, unko andar kar denge, phir पूछेंगे क्या है ये वो. I'm glad common sense prevailed. It took me a long time to go through that divorce, and it took me a lot of collateral material damage. But कोई option था नहीं. मैंने नहीं किया, ये बात अलग है. So. But lawyers खुद ही कहते हैं there is no way you can ask for a divorce.
No, I don't agree with that, Aparna. I think if a person there's a term called coming to the court with clean hands and unclean hands. The maintenance provisions in the law are very clear. The husband has to provide to the woman, especially if she is not capable of earning and things like that. And ऐसा कहीं पे भी नहीं लिखा है कि आप डाउरी केस करके ही मेंटेनेंस मांग सकते हो या डाउरी केस करके ही अपने राइट्स मांग सकते हो. If you go to the court with very simple saying that this is the fact of the case and this is why I feel abused in the marriage, it's not that the courts will not hear, it's not that judges will not hear. Again, what you're telling me is definitely a truth. Again, judges are also coming from the social spectrum. They are also coming from the same society as we do, and unfortunately people think कि physical abuse नहीं हो रहा है, physical abuse हो रहा है तो ही abuse है, otherwise तो हर चीज को हम चलता कर देते हैं. But वो सबके साथ होता है. लेकिन ऐसा नहीं है कि अगर आप सिर्फ अपने emotional abuse के बारे में कोर्ट को बताएं तो वो नहीं सुनेगी. ऐसा नहीं है. There are women who do not lie, who mention in their divorce petition that this is the abuse that they went through and this is why they want to separate. And in their maintenance petitions, they say that this is what the person needs to do because I have been abused in the marriage in that way. And there is maintenance granted. But again, those who are educated can do this and can understand this. But I agree with you. Most of the lawyers do misguide and do wrongly advise women to actually take recourse of false allegations.
Sorry to interrupt you, Deepika.
Yeah.
Two clinchers to this. One is that the guy was not earning. I was the one earning. So I was told, आपको alimony देनी पड़ेगी, in fact, because आपको maintenance देना पड़ेगा. Number two, I wanted a divorce through mutual consent. I would get the Sridhan. It is my right,
Yeah.
I was told by the lawyers, but the process is so long. After 2.5 years, I just said enough is enough. So that is why.
Aparna, in fact, going back to, I don't remember who asked this question.
And this was this was 16 years ago, so
Yeah,
things may have
absolutely.
changed.
Absolutely. No. Things have not changed, honestly. And I'm telling you, when I get into debate with women's rights activists and feminists, I often tell them that, you know, has your fight actually led to real changes even for women? You know, the system is so slow, the system is so lethargic that whether it's a man or a woman, going to court itself is such an ordeal, is sort of a harassment. Whether it's for a man or a woman, it's not that women also have it very easy, not at all. Indian courts function in a way which is more of harassment than giving justice to anybody. So I completely agree with you. Instead of focusing on reforms, which is police reforms and judicial reforms, which would probably lessen this time of trial for both man and woman, and probably aping from the West on how quickly they resolve their cases, we have just gotten, you know, provisions from them and adding them to grant, you know, justice to women. You know, Domestic Violence Act, apparently it is to save a woman from domestic violence. यहाँ पे 6 महीने तक हियरिंग ही नहीं होती केस की, तो कौन से domestic violence से आप बचा रहे हो किसी औरत को? मतलब it is so stupid. And that's why, like I said, somebody had asked a question before, these laws need to be reviewed so much. आपने कोई प्रोविजन किसी स्पेसिफिक पर्पस के लिए बनाया है, ये तो देख लो कि वो कोई पर्पस सॉल्व कर रहा है कि नहीं कर रहा है, उसका कोई इफेक्ट हो रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा है, किसी के साथ एक्चुअल में डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस हो रही है. देयर आर women who have kids who are not earning, you know, and they are so helpless and they need money. एक साल तक उनके केस ही हियर हो रहे हैं और उनको कोई मेंटेनेंस नहीं ग्रांट हुई है या कोई मेंटेनेंस नहीं दे रहा, तो कुछ नहीं हुआ. मतलब the process is so lethargic and so sad that it's a harassment, not just for men, it's for women as well who are genuine victims. So we really need to question and review on what are these laws actually serving the purpose of. Yeah.
Ma'am, there might be some men who do not believe in the whole thing what men go through, and who have internalized the misandry themselves, like, yeah, especially among leftists, because they automatically think that since it's a patriarchy, men are automatically privileged. But many people, including men, don't realize that even in patriarchal societies, men also bear the brunt and suffer. So for those men who do not agree with this men's issues and do not believe in it, who have internalized misandry themselves, how do we deal with them and how do we make them aware of it? Like, ma'am, how do you do it?
Shreya, I'm telling you something with my years of experience. Okay. If somebody doesn't want to believe you, if somebody doesn't want to hear you, and if somebody is extremely restricted with their thought process, do not waste your time on them. Just do not waste your time on them. Let them be in their cocoon, and there definitely be someday when they will realize that they were wrong, because somebody close to them would probably suffer. And then they will realize that this is not something that people are just talking about or rambling about for no good reason. There is a reason for it. I used to waste a lot of time on people who are, and in fact, yesterday on Men's Day, I had a webinar and there was somebody who was again and again rambling on this, and I gave my peace of mind to that person. But I used to take up a lot of these battles earlier on social media. Now I don't anymore, because जिसको नहीं समझना उसको नहीं समझना है. अगर किसी को समझना है तो वो आपसे कुछ पूछेगा या उसको थोड़ा सा अंडरस्टैंड करने की कोशिश करेगा, लेकिन जिसको नहीं समझना है वो आपको 1000 रीजन देगा वो चीज ना समझने के लिए. So people, especially men who are full of misandry, see, that also come from they don't realize that they are also intrinsically too much patriarchal to think that men cannot go through abuse or men do not have face any problems. They don't realize that they are themselves also victims of the same patriarchal thinking, to think that men do not suffer. But nothing that you tell them will be able to change their thinking. So don't waste time on them. That's my only advice. To all the participants, please watch Martyrs of Marriage. It's a good piece of work.